Shlama Amkhun. This video is going to be continuing with ideas in Syriac philosophy, especially as required for theology. I say required because there are things that in our fathers be considered basic, treaties, even prayers from our daily life, ways of understanding the interaction between divine and human, or even existence itself, understanding epistemology itself, that require a kind of philosophical mindset that's quite different from the one we're used to today. And towards that, I'm going to continue into the first chapter of Marga nnit, his book Marga nnit, or The Pearl on the Truth of Christianity. This was written as a rather introductory book for children beginning their theological curriculum. Now, these children would know the tree of porphyry well. I did a tiny snippet of it in my prior video, which you should see in Syriac Philosophy 3, because I'm going to build on some of those concepts. And these videos are kind of meandering through concepts just to give some comfort and reasonable expectation to us, to our horizons of what we're dealing with, because most people don't go into Neoplatonic philosophy to the level necessary to begin really understanding a text like this. It's just a technical language, and one that's quite comfortable and easy once certain concepts make sense, but it's getting those concepts to make sense that takes time. So getting into it, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so. This is a manuscript that I take from the Hill, that has a nice online library of manuscripts where you can go and access them. It's linked below, and it's a very beautiful manuscript, and it contains really awesome texts. It has, of course, the Marga nnit al-Shrar Christianutha, the Pearl on the Truth of Christianity, which has a few leaves missing, and it's very nicely written. And then it also has the Shlim al-Basra, and his Book of the Bee. The Burita is often packaged together with the Pearl, and by often I mean in the manuscript tradition. It also has some less common texts such as Aesop's Fables and the Cream of Wisdom, Bar Auraya of Bar Hebraeus. So it's a really cool package, and it's a beautiful manuscript. So if you're Syriacs there, go ahead and check it out. We're going to just start right here with Odysseus Marga nnit, and I'm going to try to make this both a learning and both a language and a theology lesson. So it begins here. Mumrakadmaya Theoria. So the first chapter, and Theoria, which they mean contemplation of the divine. The Al-Alaha. Kapalion Kadmaya Al-Haid Ith Alaha. On that there is God. Wad Alma Hawiya Hu Wa'wid Uzawdanaya. And that the world is created and becoming and is temporal or temporary. It begins. Paulus Shlicha, Paul the Apostle, Shmeyana, so Paul the Heavenly Apostle, who gluskma Simatha Duruch. So gluskma, it's a Greek word. It means like a container or a box. And he is the box of Simatha, of treasures, of things that are simet, that are placed, spiritual. So Paul, the Heavenly Apostle, he who is the treasure chest of the Spirit, and Pilasopa Ruhanaya, and spiritual philosopher. And now he gives his reason for why he gives this title to Paul. Bahaid wa'in lam lalaha wam akwin min biryata mishkhinle. In that, seeking a God, wa'in, buying, wam akwin, and researching, min biryata, from creation, mishkhinle, so that those who seek God research creation, study natural science and find him there. This is also a quote from Pshutta of Act 17:27. That ye be seeking God, and studying min from created things you will find him. For he is not far from each and every one of us. And for Odishu, and you can see this also in some of his Arabic works, which are even more complex in their language. For Odishu, God is that which is found in his creation primarily, and then there also is natural revelation. There's supernatural revelations, revelation from God, but these aren't two separate truths. Truth is something that is outside of time and space, but reveals itself within time and space. So it's revelation, whether through the limited fashion that it is in the physical world, the world we live in time and space, or in the limited fashion of the revelation of words, right? So the Bible has words in it. So kind of like trying to capture the full divinity and humanity of Christ on a board with paint is not what any iconographer can ever actually accomplish. The same way that even the words of Scripture, to the extent that words allow, they direct us towards the truth, but they in themselves cannot be the truth because they are just human words. Their limiting factor is there. And so creation itself also is showing the Creator forth. It's in this concept. There is no concept like you would see in the West, where faith means believing something unscientific. For Odishu, indeed for the Church of the East tradition, we profoundly believe God reasonably. And now there's also mystic knowledge. So mystic knowledge would be that which would be the level of divine energy going out from God, and a human being transcending the limitedness of his humanity and being gifted with illumination in that kind of way. So there is that sense of knowledge, but even that is, at least in the written tradition, somehow not as focused as much as the way that intellectual contemplation and understanding of God as completely incomprehensible is this path of knowledge. So this knowledge of that he is by nature through the ways his marnyatha, the way his anxieties or his illuminating energies going out, his divine energy going out, to use the Greek Orthodox language. Through that we know him. And in this way, Odishu continues. So we can go on to sentence 2. Min biryata mishkin. So we find him through creation, right? So that means if you are studying science, you're going to end up realizing that you're studying effects of a cause. You can go up that ladder and you're going to find a cause of all who is himself uncaused. Shwichta utmihta. So praised and wondrous, l'shatista theologia, to the foundation of theology. Biyadruha, by the Spirit, ishkach bahaid min umanutha. So it is after theology. Biyadruha ishkach, by the Spirit it is found. Bahaid min ruha, by this that of this. I'm sorry. Bahaid min umanutha, by the craft. L'umana yad'in khnan. We know the craftsman. So if you see the craft, you know the craftsman. If you see a basket, you know that there's a basket weaver. Minwada awuda, of the thing done, the doer. Mishtodi. Da'widu alma, that the world is awid, that it is created. Wahweya, and happens. So that means in time and space. When we use the word that something huwa, we're saying that it took place in time and space, not that it exists, as in a truth exists. This is existing the way you would say, I exist or Napoleon existed. So we know, min awada la'awuda mishtodin, so from the thing made, the maker we know, wa awidu al mahwaya, and we know that the world was created. Wozona, and in time, so it's not eternal. Shkal shuraya, it took a beginning. So he's going against the core Aristotelian idea of an eternal unmoved mover. Mithchewya hana, this one is shown. Mrakwana, he is the mrakwana. He who raku is like the way you would compose a poem, or that you would compose from various pieces a device. So he's the mrakwana, the composer, the putter together. Bukhulna youth, in all of it, wamnawath, and in its individual parts. So he composes this craftsman of the universe, the whole universe at once, but also its individual component parts. Wamlachmana wam takhsana. So he mlachim means to harmonize it, as in from contrasting bits. Taksana is to give it taxis, to give it before and after, either in time or also in cause and effect. Cause and effect is the more important sense of priority. Ithle mrakwana. It has a mrakwana, a composer, wamlachmana, and a harmonizer, wamtaksana, an organizer. Takhwitha, the demonstration min kul al rukawe, the demonstration on its being rukawa, on its having been composed. Sahda kulna yuthe min nawatha sagi mrakwa, so that its entirety has many parts, and so it's composed of many parts. Ugushma kulhun min hule u ajjem rekwin. So the entirety of the body of Alma, of the world, of the universe, has Adsha and Hula. So the word Adsha right here means a species or a form, and Hula is matter. So Adsha, which I translate as form and matter, and in English we're using a little bit of a different language. We're pulling from Latin scholasticism, but Adsha speaks of what something is. So you could say the species of, let's say, dog, right? And that species is actually pointing to a specific dogness or set of qualities of dog, that because God has defined them, because God in his mind, let's say, says let there be living creatures and let them be diverse, and in the way that works out in time and space, because he set these living creatures within time and space, it breaks down into plants and animals into reptiles and fish and birds and mammals, and mammals has within it dogs, and that's just the interaction between God's own desire for diversity and his harmonization of diversity, and his desire for order and growth in the world, so that things don't just fall apart. You get the species of dog, you get the idea of dog, and we know dogs, they have a dogness to them, right? And that dog species, though, doesn't exist by itself. You can't actually tell me, what color dog is, what height dog is. So in time and space, we meet dogs, so we'll call Fido. And Fido is this form of dog, it's Adsha, but in a particular material reality, which includes his time when he was born, when he'll die, space, that he's right there outside my door sitting down and nowhere else. Everything else in the universe is non-Fido, and Fido himself is defined by the space that is not Fido, right? There's a specific limitation of time and space, so that's material, that's matter. But that matter is filled. Matter by itself is nothing. It's just the idea of of time and space and diversity within it. The same way that a form by itself can only exist in other worlds, in worlds of the angelic realm. It can't exist in the realm of material reality that we live in. So going back to Marga nnit, Let's see if that can help us along. So he's talking here again how the world has a harmonizer because it's harmonious, has a composer because it's composed, or compounder, mrakwana, that's a good word for it, compounder, because it's compounded. And what's it compounded of? Matter and form. Hula u'ajja. Mrakwin, it's compounded of matter and form. And see, these are opposite things. That there is an eternal idea of dog is the opposite of dogness is defined only by the very thing that's sitting on my left foot. And see, these two being contrary things have to be held in a union. It's a union of opposites. It's the union of form and matter. So he is the Mrakwana, the composer of these two contrasting elements, right? One of them is purely formal, the other one's purely material, and they are held together. And why is that proof of God? Well, because the effect of having humanity makes sense as a word, right? I say the word humanity. Well, where is humanity? Is it in the space between me and the computer screen? No, humanity doesn't exist there. What do I mean that humanity doesn't exist between my face and the computer screen? There's no human being there. Does that mean human being doesn't exist? No, it does. It exists right in the space behind my face and on the chair I'm sitting and where you're standing or sitting. And so it's very local. Well, then why do we speak of humanity as if it's something that is throughout the universe? How's that possible? Well, because humanity is a form. It's an edsha. It exists everywhere in the universe of forms, in the world of forms, and the alma, the shrara, in the world of truth, not in the world of happenings, alma dahweya, which is what we live in. So speak a tertin alma dahwed, that God created two worlds, the world, and this is let me make it less confusing, that God created the universe on at least two levels, one of truth and one of happenings, and happenings aren't truths, right? I am not the truth of humanity. I'm an instantiation of humanity, and what instantiates me? Matter. The place I'm in, the time I'm in, when I'm born, the particular arrangements of cells that are arranged according to the form of human. But that form itself can't be found in this universe in its pure form. So he is the Mrakwana because he is the cause of the form, which in turn is the cause of the matter, right? Because God desires that there be human beings exist in time and space. Because they exist in time and space, that gives them the matter, or let's say the randomness that helps you and me exist where we are, but also not exist where we're not. And that this has this composure to it, and that's leading him to his next thought. منهولة من أجل مركوين متزعانة the min mitchaziane. So mitziana means that which causes something to move. So here he's talking about the cause of motion or the cause of change in the universe. The min mitchaziane, so from visible causes of motion. So that's like if I flick a ball and it moves. Ula mitchaziane. So that's like the cause of energy in the universe. Time itself. So you're talking about kind of the la mitziana would be quantum factors in the universe. That there's this continuity of motion that at the same time has a stillness to it. Usahda khathitha al mlachmanuthe barnasha al masora, and a very precise witness to how composed and how malachma, meaning harmonized like music, harmonized of opposites, is that man himself. Why? He goes barnasha al ora. This means man is a microcosm. He's translating the Greek here. Barnasha al ora. Man is a small version of the universe, and that means that man has both a spirit and a body, just as the universe has these two worlds in which it exists, the world of spirit and the world of body, the world of truth and the world of physical of happenings, of hoeya. That's part of the basic curriculum of the Church of the East. And that chart we were looking at in videos 2 and 3, the way of understanding the elements. And that means that that which is the order in the universe is actually patterned off of man, and the order within a society is also patterned off of him. That man himself is the sum of the universe. He is the microcosm. And this is something that Shlimun al-Basra, who again is usually packaged, the Burita, his book of the bee, together with Marudishu. Shlimun does this wonderfully in a line where he says that Adam is the first conceived but last created. It means God conceives of man. He thinks of man. Adam exists in God's mind, which is to say Adam is truth. His true birth is before there's anything, even the elements. He is heaven and earth. He's the model of heaven and earth. And then within time, creation takes effect. But that's only a reflection of the eternal truth, right? So material things are just basically like rain coming down from a cloud. They just condescend from the eternal truth, right? God's idea of heaven and earth is a cause for the physical. Everything material is secondary, much less real than something immaterial. And yet, the material is put in space and time by the material. And so man is a small version of the universe because we have a spirit like an angel and a body like any animal. And we have this moral character. And in the human being, you can see heaven and earth. You can see the human soul, but also the earthen aspect of the body, right? I can get hungry, and yet I can fast as an act of worship. I have a soul that can contemplate God, and yet you can fry out my brains and make me in a vegetative state. That human immaterial mind is connected to a physical brain. And human consciousness, of course, exists immaterially, and yet is usually expressed materially. So, heaven and earth, this kind of concept. That in it, in this world, in this al-masur, microcosm, both of man and of the universe, ithlacham was made harmonious, kul dahwa, everything that was. Ay kannad, dal najman hakima shiprath al-memar, such that Nash min Hakime, a man among the wise, Shiprath Memar, found it beautiful to say, Asachtha Siktha Barnasha. Man is a abbreviated edition. أو ذا خريات الألمة كله ولا خامد كل برياتها. And he holds with him, in short, the entire world and the harmonies of all things created. So, that the world has order is self-evident. From the wondrous order of the heavens, Nahire, and the luminaries, Wustukhse, so the elements, that's the four elements. See Syriac Philosophy 3 and earlier. Stukhse mith Yaldane, who give birth, who are causes, Minhun Yayatha Nisvatha, from them things that grow, Mithbirna Uhadamid Khewatha, and that which has bodies and has life, animals, with the warnasha and man. Zakhyat mihutha, the wonder itself is victorious. Aliyutha tukasehun ulkulli khikhimta, to all wisdom, udayata da'wide al-hade. So the wonder of their order, the order of everything created, is victorious, is greater than all the wisdom and knowledge of things that are created. Dal hade philosope qedmai. About this, the first philosophers, he means the Greeks. Ked kulla zawa min zi'ana. Dan, that they knew every zawa movement of its zi'ana, of that which causes its motion. So what that means is, I'm a motion as a human being. I'm in existence within time and space. Think of it as expenditure of energy. Something has to put that into motion, right? So I was born of a mother and a father. There's my proximate cause. And yet, at the higher level, you would say that if you look and you see that there is a capacity for adaptation, evolution in plants, so that, right, the tomato of 500 years ago can become the tomato we eat today. That capacity within just the variety of the tomato itself is something that has to have a cause. It's an effect, right? That definition of tomato that evolves, and it has to have a cause that's outside of space and time, which regulates its genetic variety. So anything that you see that's a motion, that is a series of variety of possibility within matter, has to have that which keeps it organized. And that's the wonder that he's looking at. And so far, Odysseus doing, I believe, what he would consider philosophy, but he would consider philosophy within the study of God. Everything reveals God here. And I think he would consider a philosophy that doesn't think along those lines, so self-defeating as to be just flapping words. I mean, if you're not explaining to him how things are eternally true and have a real sense of truth, then I think he would say, what's the point of your philosophy? And maybe an example of this is every time a scientist looks in a microscope and they look at blood and they start taking notes, they're thinking very much in time and space, but they're assuming very much that what is human is defined by a cause of all outside of time and space. And why do they do that? Because they're presumably making discovering things, making observations about the human beings, as if every time they took blood from a different bunch of cells that they recognize as human, that there's that stability in the universe through which they would recognize humans, and that blood from Joe and blood from Tom is all human. Well, that means that there is a humanity that's in common, and that means that there is a presumption of order. And we only experience that in a completely case-by-case basis, inductively, unless we are able to think, and to think beyond just saying, well, I don't really know it's human, I just play along with this, which would end the idea of human thought, I would think. That become very difficult to think within. Then you presume that God came up with the idea of what human beings are, that Adam and Eve primarily eternally exist in the mind of God, and that they are the cause of being of the universe, to which the scientists can look to and say, well, since there is the harmonizer, I can see the harmony. And if there wasn't the harmonizer, I would have to presume there wasn't the harmony. Something along those lines. Every movement is judged by its mover. So by if you know the cause, you know the effect. If you just know the effect, you don't know the cause. It's that kind of idea, right? It's not good enough to know. Knowing what a dog is makes no sense if you don't know what mammals are. What mammals are makes no sense if you don't know what an animal is. Animals are makes no sense if you don't know what life is. If you don't know what life is, it doesn't make sense unless you know what angels are. Angels don't make sense unless you know about the creation of heaven and earth in the mind of God, and God is the cause of all. And God, as the cause of all, is the cause of all, and therefore everything else can make sense or not make sense depending on confirmation of that belief. And I think that at this point I've gone on for 30 minutes, and that we can pick this up in a second video. Thank you. God bless. Please let me know ways I can improve this. I can put up transliterations. I can work from a translation. I don't know if this is a confusing way to go through this text or not. Those who made it through the whole video, please tell me ways that I can improve it, because it's always a challenge figuring out exactly how I want to execute something like this. Thank you very much. God bless. Goodbye.